is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen. Our top stories. China's President Xi Jinping says Taiwan must be reunified peacefully with the mainland as tensions in the region increase. The Taliban hold their first formal talks with the United States since coming to power. Lebanon's entire electric supply grid shuts down as its two main power stations run out of fuel. And why Serbia will not be returning to lockdown despite a record surge in coronavirus. China's president has said that reunification with Taiwan must be fulfilled as tensions over the island increase. Xi Jinping said unification should be achieved peacefully. In response, Taiwan says its future lies in the hands of its people. Su Yungting reports now from Beijing.
Senior officials and representatives from all across China gathered at the Great Hall of the People to remember the important chapter in China's history. This year marks the 110th anniversary of the Shanghai Revolution that put an end to more than 2,000 years of imperial rule in China. The revolution is of great historical significance as it led to the establishment of the Republic of China and the following social changes in the country. President Xi Jinping delivered a speech at the event, stressing national integrity.
中国共产党领导是历史的选择.
The CPC was chosen to lead by history and by the people. Its leadership is very foundation and lifeblood of the party and the country, and it is the crux upon which the interests and the well-being of all Chinese people depend.
President Xi said Sun Yat-sen, the forerunner of China's democratic revolution, has been a champion of national unity and integrity. He also emphasized that the CPC members are the strongest supporters, most loyal collaborators, and most faithful successors of Sun's revolutionary undertakings.
以和平方式实现祖国统一.
National reunification by peaceful means best serves the interests of the Chinese nation as a whole, including our compatriots in Taiwan. We will adhere to the basic policies of peaceful reunification and one country, two systems, uphold the One China principle and the 1992 consensus, and work for the peaceful development of cross-strait relations. Compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait should stand on the right side of history and join hands to achieve China's complete reunification and the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
President Xi Jinping is calling on the Chinese people to learn from revolutionaries' noble patriotism and devotion to the motherland and carry on the pursuit of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Su Yuting, CGTN, Beijing.
China says it has pressed the United States to eliminate tariffs during trade negotiations between the world's biggest economies. Both sides have agreed to continue talks and work towards a more positive economic relationship. Our correspondent Li Jianhua reports.
Who marks the second time that Catherine Tai and Liu He have spoken, and it follows Tai's speech on Monday that she will seek frank exchanges with China, actually, and also make China fulfill its commitments under the Phase 1 trade deal. So in the call, both sides basically have agreed to the fact that the world's two largest economies should strengthen trade cooperation and straighten out differences through negotiations. And Catherine Tai earlier in the White House's China trade policy had shown signs of taking a hard line against China, saying the U.S. Will take full range of tools, I'm quoting her, to protect American workers and businesses if the trade negotiations fail. So the relationship between China and the United States is, as some experts call it, defrosting. So we are not saying that the two countries' relationship is warming up at this point. There are still many differences, including the trade war, the origin of COVID-19, Taiwan, the South China Sea, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, to name a few. But at least Beijing and Washington are willing to talk, and we do see some signs that the relationship is looking up a bit. 2 days ago, Yang Jiechi and Jake Sullivan met face-to-face with both agreeing sound relationship between China and the US is good for all. Yang didn't want to define the China-US relationship as competition, and the US side is shifting its rhetoric from strengthening its competitive hand to now responsible competition.
Li Jianhua reporting from Beijing. A delegation from the United States is meeting the Taliban in Qatar's capital for the first high-level talk since American troops withdrew from Afghanistan. The Biden administration says the talks in Doha are aimed at easing the evacuation of foreign citizens and at-risk Afghans. Well, our correspondent Nicole Johnston has been watching events. What do both sides want to get out of these talks?
Well, the Taliban's acting foreign minister has said that they want humanitarian aid and really they want money. So he's asking the United States to give them access to Afghanistan's central bank reserves, and they want COVID vaccines. But effectively, both sides really just want an implementation of the Doha Agreement, and that was signed last year in February. For the United States perspective, they want to continue to be able to evacuate people outside of Afghanistan, and they want an agreement from the Taliban that they will protect women's rights, that they'll have an inclusive government, and that they'll start to crack down on terrorist groups like ISIS-K, as we've seen with a couple of attacks over the last week.
And what's the significance of these talks taking place?
Well, as you said, the real significance is the fact that it's the first talks that we've had since the Afghan government collapsed and since the Taliban has taken over. Really what the Taliban wants is international recognition. And the West and the United States are saying that they won't recognise the Taliban. But when you have American officials flying into Qatar, meeting for direct face-to-face talks with Taliban officials, while it's not a direct recognition, it does start to confer some real status on the Taliban, and that's a win for them. That's what they want to see happening. It's already starting to happen with countries like Russia and China, and to have the United States and eventually the European Union sitting down across a table with Taliban officials, that will give them that recognition that they're craving right now.
And what about Qatar's role as mediator in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, the role of Qatar is fascinating. It's actually had a Taliban office since 2013. You know, they've been the main mediator or interlocutor for the international community because essentially somebody had to do it. Somebody had to have a direct line of communication with the Taliban, and in the end, Qatar, Doha took on that role. It's not the first time they've done it. They've done it with the Muslim Brotherhood, with Hamas, in Libya, in Sudan. Effectively for Doha, though, it allows them to punch above their weight diplomatically. And it's got them back on board with the United States. Under the former President Trump, Qatar was in the bad books there for a long time. Right now, we've had US officials saying, sort of talking up Qatar's role in terms of bringing this peace deal about, in terms of being a negotiator. And effectively, just to point out, of course, that the United States has an air base, the Al Ubaid air base in Qatar. So even during this entire evacuation process, 60,000 of the 120,000 people evacuated out of Afghanistan ended up going through Doha, all facilitated by Doha and the rulers of that country, and that's been a real win for Qatar, something that they'll be continuing to try and push as long as they've got the Taliban sitting right there next to them.
Nicole Johnston, thank you very much. The election in the Czech Republic hangs in the balance. Two opposition groups could oust the Prime Minister, Andrej Babiš, but he could still hold on with a minority government. Between them, the opposition groups have taken more than 100 seats in the 200-member lower house, claiming a combined majority with around 90% of the votes counted. Babiš, a 67-year-old billionaire, is seeking a second term while battling criticism over his financial dealings and mishandling of the pandemic. German police are investigating several cases of so-called Havana syndrome at the US Embassy in Berlin. The authorities say the investigation into an alleged sonic weapon attack began in August. The mysterious ailment, which includes nausea, memory lapses and dizziness, is believed to have affected 200 American diplomats, officials and family members worldwide. Volcanic lava has engulfed at least 4 more buildings on the Spanish Canary island of La Palma. The volcano has been erupting since the 19th of September and has so far destroyed more than 800 buildings, forcing nearly 6,000 people to flee their homes. Iran's first president after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Abu Hassan Bani Sadr, has died at the age of 88. He came to power in 1980 but fled to France the following year after a power struggle with radical clerics. He died in Paris after a long illness. The lights are off in Lebanon after fuel shortages forced its 2 largest power stations to close down. Officials say it could take days to restore electricity supplies across the whole of the country. The recent economic crisis in Lebanon has deepened as supplies of imported fuel have dried up. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Mia Alberti in Beirut. Mia, how bad is the situation there now?
Well, it's quite bad. It's not every day that a country runs out of electricity, but it should not come as a surprise, and it doesn't come as a surprise for the Lebanese population. And let me just show you, in terms of daily life, everything remains the same. We are on the 13th floor, so you should be able to see a lot of lights behind me. All of the lights that you see right now are powered by private generators, and that's how the Lebanese have been living for decades, because they cannot rely on the central electricity supplier for many years. So this is not a new situation, but it could be quite tragic. Like you said, there is a huge fuel crisis. There's lack of liquidity to buy fuel and to import fuel. And so all of these private generators that keep Lebanon alive, and we are talking about hospitals, schools, businesses, water supplies, everything you can imagine, they're also run on fuel. Actually, most of the power sector in Lebanon is run on fuel. So if fuel runs out and there's no electricity, then Lebanon will be in the dark. And that's already the reality for many people who I recently talked to.
The portrait of Lebanon's fuel crisis: a daily struggle to find gasoline and diesel, and an even greater one to afford it.
And I live in South Lebanon. And in South Lebanon, none of the gas stations are open. The only place that I can fill my car with gasoline is in Beirut.
Lebanon is facing a severe economic crisis, and the country is struggling to buy and import fuel. Shortages have uncovered the shortcomings of Lebanon's electricity sector, crippled by corruption and mismanagement. For decades, generators have been used to keep the lights on. Now they are too expensive to maintain.
You don't know what happens next day if the fuel is off, and now they said to us to pay in dollar. $270 is too much.
The owner of this photocopy shop didn't want to show his identity. He only has power for half of the day. For the rest, business is halted. The reduction of state subsidies that the government can no longer afford has worsened the crisis.
People are left alone with bad mismanagement of the crisis. A layer that added the complexity of this is that we have smuggling, we have also hoarding and from the importers, and the rise of this black market. And electricity is not only impacting electricity itself, but it is impacting health, education, telecom, because most of the sector, and if there is a lesson from this crisis, is that we are a country that fully relies on diesel.
Fuel from Iran and Iraq is now making its way into the country, and talks with Jordan are ongoing about getting Egyptian gas through Syria. But with elections looming, progress is slow, and the situation grows unsustainable for many. This Syrian barbershop has a couple of months left before bankruptcy. Even when the lights are on, there are no customers.
Most are clients, they go to another barbershop because the time of electricity here, it's not fit on their schedule, and we cannot handle this situation.
Mia, this fuel crisis in the country has been brewing for a while now. What's the plan? What are the plans to deal with this?
Well, the immediate solution for this power shortage, the central electricity supplier has said that they might go and use the army oil reserves to get these two important power plants back on and the electricity back on. But that doesn't really solve the power crisis in Lebanon because it is mostly focused on fuel. So the most important thing on the shorter term will be for the Lebanese government to achieve liquidity to buy foreign currency to import fuel. So the prices of fuel for private use can also be stabilized and people can resume working and living like they used to. That's already happening with the support of Iraq that signed a one-year plan with Lebanon to supply oil. Iran has also been supplying some fuel through a deal with Hezbollah. So far, they have sent 3 fuel tankers to supply Lebanon with fuel. That's mostly an emergency plan. And then there's also the longer-term investments. Lebanon is in talks with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to get a loan and try to stabilize the economy and then the fuel crisis. And there's also talks with Jordan to try and get Egyptian oil to Lebanon through Syria. This is a deal that has been vocally supported by the US. So a lot of options, but the immediate would be to find some way to stabilize the fuel crisis so people can resume their daily lives.
Mia Alberti in Beirut, thank you very much. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead here on The World Today. From extinction to rebirth, why experts are trying to recreate a woolly mammoth.
Billions of years of evolution on Earth. Different life forms sharing one planet, from single cells to complex ecosystems. They integrate, split, prosper, and perish. They affect our planet and are in turn affected by this diversified world of which humans are a part. It's time to build a shared future for all on Earth. Tune in to CGTN's special coverage on our global commitment to the planet.
This week on Razor, in a COP15 special, we'll take another look at those wonderful wandering elephants. And restoring seagrass, a home to thousands of marine species that absorb CO2 30 times faster than rainforests.
We scientists need to be actually out there trying to change things rather than studying the loss and the decline of these oceans that once supported us.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. China's President Xi Jinping says Taiwan must be reunified peacefully with the mainland as tensions in the region increase. The Taliban hold their first formal talks with the United States since coming to power. And Lebanon's entire electricity supply grid shuts down as its 2 main power stations run out of fuel. Another grim COVID milestone for Brazil. 600,000 deaths have now been attributed to the virus, the world's second highest total after the United States. A memorial ceremony has been held to remember those who've died, but there was criticism too of the government's handling of the pandemic. Lucretia Franco reports.
Rio de Janeiro's Copacabana beach. 600 white handkerchiefs, each representing 1,000 COVID-19 deaths. A silent tribute to more than 600,000 Brazilians who have now died in the pandemic.
It can't be the case that no one is held responsible for these numbers. They are way too high, and it didn't need to happen. But it did happen because of the incompetence, insensitivity, and irresponsible actions of those who hold the highest positions of power in this country.
The words irresponsibility, incompetence, insensitivity were heard throughout the day. Brazil is second only to the United States in the number of COVID-19 deaths, a grim reality these protesters blame on the country's biggest pandemic skeptic, President Jair Bolsonaro. He's one of the very few Brazilians who refuses to be vaccinated, most recently ignoring the explicit rules of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. According to the latest official data, 60% of the population, or 95.3 million Brazilians over 18 years old, are fully vaccinated, and those numbers continue to climb rapidly.
I have questioned Anvisa, the health authority, and those who are vaccinated about why people have to continue quarantining. If they believe in science, why don't they trust the vaccine?
Infectious disease expert Roberto Medronho says the president is responsible for denying the pandemic and obstructing the vaccine rollout.
If we had a president who respected science, who sought the best medical practice in order to prevent the population from being infected, I can say for sure that hundreds of thousands of lives could have been saved. We could have started vaccinating people in December of 2020, and we could have fully vaccinated the whole population months ago.
Pressure is mounting to hold President Bolsonaro accountable. A Senate committee formally investigating the president's actions said its final report will be released later this month. Expectations among experts are that the report will recommend the impeachment of the president. Lucrecia Franco, CGTN, Rio de Janeiro.
Serbia will not return to a state of lockdown, nor will it bring back restrictive measures. That's the message from the country's Prime Minister. The government has been holding crisis talks in Belgrade after Serbia recorded its highest daily infection rate since the start of the pandemic. Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
COVID-related work absences are causing problems for many in Serbia. This small heating company in the capital Belgrade are busy at this time of year, but staff absences are a problem.
One of our colleagues is on sick leave right now, as he and his entire family have COVID. He's now at home in isolation, and we need his help in our team because he's a very important member. We have had those situations since last year. I had COVID too, and even when someone had an ordinary cold and we don't know what it is, the colleague is automatically on sick leave.
In recent days, between 7,000 and 8,000 people in Serbia have been testing positive for the COVID-19, one of the highest infection rates in the world. And experts believe the actual number of infected may be much higher. This is the queue at just one testing center in Belgrade. In the early afternoon, we've counted over 40 people waiting to be seen. Official statistics indicate the majority of new infections are among people who are not vaccinated. At the crisis management team meeting in Belgrade, public health officials asked for lockdown measures to be imposed, but the government rejected this.
What is necessary is vaccination, vaccination, vaccination. The inoculation against coronavirus is the only answer to the pandemic. If we were to impose restrictive measures, we'd only prolong the agony and be postponing the resolution.
The Prime Minister said only 54% of Serbs have opted to receive the COVID-19 jab. She also said that lockdowns don't work in Serbia. So from now on, every individual has to accept responsibility for ending the pandemic by taking the vaccine.
Although not directly admitted, it seems that Serbia has decided to follow the Swedish model of tackling the COVID-19 pandemic by deciding on no more lockdowns and no more devastating blows to the economy. From now on, everything will be focused on persuading people to just take the jab. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Belgrade.
Jurassic Park may be closer than you think. Innovations in biosciences mean it could soon be possible to bring back extinct animals such as the woolly mammoth, or at least something similar. Experts are working on an elephant-mammoth hybrid, which could also play a role in slowing climate change. Caroline Malone explains.
These days, the only way most people get to see a woolly mammoth is like this, in a museum.
Mammoths first appeared on Earth around 8 million years ago. The woolly species looked like an elephant with a shaggy coat that adapted to life in the cold. With fossils found in modern-day Siberia, Europe and North America dated thousands of years old.
We know that with the climate changes and the ice ages, these populations can get stressed out. But that isn't sufficient to explain the pattern of extinction that we see. Turns out that human pressure might have been the last nail in the coffin.
Colossal, a new bioscience and genetic engineering company, has grand plans for the woolly mammoth. They're taking some of its DNA, de-extincting genes, and putting them into Asian elephants to create what they hope will be a modern-day cold-weather species that can live in the Arctic. They say the main goals are to protect Asian elephants and capture and store carbon to reduce climate change. Lead scientist and co-founder of Colossal, George Church, is well known for his innovations in genomic science. He says they'll need hundreds or a few thousand Arctic elephants to make it work.
Little known fact that the mammoths would, and elephants for that matter, but mammoths have been measured to do about the equivalent of 2 times around the globe in a lifetime. So it's a lot of space they cover.
The theory is that the Arctic elephant, or as some call it, the mammophant, would help to trample the snow and insulate the permafrost, or frozen ground, counteracting melting that leads to carbon dioxide release in climate change. Some scientists are skeptical of the need for the Arctic elephants, as it's been shown you can get permafrost cooling by introducing bison, moose and horses to the landscape, while others see the innovations as important.
The challenging work for bringing back a woolly mammoth, or the work that we've done in protecting endangered species using biotechnology, these are tools that will become essential for biodiversity.
Elephants live in highly complex social groups or herds and learn how to behave from their peers. Questions remain about how the Arctic elephant will learn to adapt, if an elephant-mammoth hybrid is even viable or ethical. However, Colossal has received $15 million in initial funds for its work in cutting-edge biotechnologies, aiming for the first calves within 6 years. Caroline Malone, CGTN, Washington.
And finally, it's up, up and away as the best hot air balloonists in Germany take to the skies for this year's national championships. 25 balloon pilots are competing in different tasks over 5 days, which will test their speed, skill and precision. Challenges include placing a sandbag as close as possible to a mark. The winner will be announced on Sunday. The headlines again. China's President Xi Jinping says Taiwan must be reunified peacefully with the mainland as tensions in the region increase. The Taliban hold their first formal talks with the United States since coming to power. And Lebanon's entire electricity supply grid shuts down as its 2 main power stations run out of fuel. And that's it for The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're available on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and on the CGTN app. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.